Call me back when you see flames. By user Elsa Grande Ricardo. This was in the dinosaur days of the 90s and happened to a friend of mine. His company captured check images for several banks using a high-speed check reader's order. At the time, these were high-teach and high-dollar, and since they were essential equipment, came with 24/7 maintenance. One night they called for support, told the tech think there's something wrong with the sorter. Smells like hot electrical. It was on a winter night, and the tech didn't want to leave his cozy bed and drive an hour to investigate the issue. So he told them, call me back when you see flames, and hung up. An hour later, his phone rings again. Okay, we have flames. Are you going to come now? Of course. The sorter was now a boat anchor, and the manufacturer maintenance company sent a bunch of guys in suits to argue how they were in no way liable. Unfortunately for them, Friend's company recorded all their phone calls and simply played back the tech telling them to run it until they see flames. Friend's company got a brand new $250 sorter out of it. I think the tech guy got an extended period of unemployment. Fighting with purchasing. By user Bobar. This story is probably only tangentially related to tech support, but it is related to clueless users, so here it is. Back in the 1990s when I was a programmer, my group was responsible for a business letter writing package. At the time, the editor control was home, grown, and had rudimentary bolding, italics, and underlining. However, we had been asked by several clients to hook it up to Microsoft Word. One of the developers on my team got the information for Microsoft Word and filled out the requisition slip and sent it to purchasing. Under the reason for purchase box, he put integrate Mrs. Word with our software per client's request. About 2 weeks later, he gets an email stating that the purchase had been rejected. He thought maybe it was because he was relatively new to the company, so he asked me to submit the requisition. I did, and even included the reason. A week later, I also received a rejection notice, so I called the purchasing office. When I asked why the request was being rejected, I was told our company standard is Lotus Notes. Since you already have Lotus Notes installed on your computer, there's no need for you to have Microsoft Word. I told the purchasing agent that this wasn't for use on our day-to-day tasks, but it was so we could integrate Microsoft Word into our business letter writing package, as requested by the client. So for some reason, this simply did not compute, and I was told once again that our company standard was Lotus Notes and we could not get Microsoft Word. I went to my boss, and we both went to his boss and told him the tale. The boss, squared, got on the phone and called the head of the purchasing department and rained down fire and brimstone, telling them that because their purchasing agent could not understand the difference between using something for my work and making sure something works for our client, we were now 3 weeks behind. By the following Monday, we had a brand new set of floppy disks for Mrs. Word. Forget who moved my cheese, who moved my mouse, and also everything else. By user Warlock415. From me too, Brian Jeff Subj. Ticket 20,240,221.15. Date 2/27. Hey, guys. Ref above ticket. The new hire is starting tomorrow 2/28 instead of 3/4. Please set up cubicle 168 for them by end of day.
Reply from Jeff. Verbal. Zug zug.
From my boss to me Subj. New hire name, desk, not set up date, 2/28. Me. I was here at 7 a.m. and the cube 4 name was not set up. Going forward, make sure to check Brian and Jeff's work on your way out when you assign them to work together. Thought from me, the fuck. They're screw-ups and they feed off each other, but to completely not do the work. From Grand Boss to my boss, me, my team, Subja, feud, junk alert, date 2/28. Hi team, please make sure this doesn't happen again. It's a really bad look. From Dill 2, Grand Boss Subja, junk alert, date 2/27. Yeah, Grand Boss. I just wanted to let y'all know that there was some leftover stuff in cube 168 that I saw as I was leaving today. I went ahead and let Jim and facilities know to clear it out of there for you since we got a new hire starting Monday and they might be sitting there. Take care. Yick. Bill, fire department phone line. By user Bo Kevin. I saw a comment thread on our Sizen main about ISP technicians sneaking into demarc spaces, and it reminded me of this story from a couple years ago. At my previous company AA, they owned Building 1 and Building 2. At some point, there was some weird restructuring and moving of buildings. At the end of this, company built a property building 3 and sold building 2 and half of building 1 to another company, B. They were all 3 in a row, so it was a little weird that we were split by them. There was an underground fiber line ran somewhere between our 2 buildings, 1 and 3. And there was an entire infrastructure set up between their 2 sites above ground, 2 and 3. There was also an enclosed walkway that connected them. Company B was making some facilities changes, and with this new system, they needed to make some other changes to continue to meet building codes. The enclosed walkway and anything in it needed to be completely demolished to separate the 2 buildings and allow emergency egress from all sides of their building too. They politely communicated the details to us, as good neighbors do, and our facilities team sent out details related to parking and site access. The construction was completed. Everything seemed fine. Some time passed. Our annual elevator certification was scheduled, and part of this included checking that the emergency phone line worked. You know how if you get trapped in an elevator, you should be able to press the emergency button or lift a phone and immediately get transferred to the local emergency services. That phone, the inspection people tested the phone and nothing. The line was dead. We were given a few weeks to make the necessary changes and get it back up to code, and they would reschedule. My boss tried to get in touch with a certain major national ICE whose name is 3 letters with a symbol. We had the absolute worst luck with them. Every time we needed support, our provided account numbers couldn't be found. Eventually, they would just open a new account for us. Our billing team was convinced they never applied an overpayment correctly, but they couldn't get anything communicated because of all the issues with the account. A year before this story, they accidentally canceled one of our other phone lines and gave away the number, so we didn't even know which phone number was supposed to be assigned to this elevator. Our account manager was no longer with the company. The replacement person who was listed on their voicemail message didn't even work on the own team anymore. We eventually got a response from some VP who was able to provide us with our new, who scheduled an on-site visit to troubleshoot and repair the phone line. I was the, site tech for the day and got the phone call that the SP tech would be there in about 5 minutes. I normally worked from building 3, so I headed over to building 1 to meet him. 10 minutes later, he called me and said that he's in the lobby of building 2. I told him that we no longer worked from building 2, as of about 15 years prior, but he insists that's where the billing address was. I told him it certainly wasn't, and that the elevator was in building 1. I was standing inside the comms room, and there was a very clearly labeled box that had property of provider, do not touch stamped on it. The technician eventually believed me and walked to building 1. He measured all of the lines, and there was no voltage going to any of them, which implied nothing was hooked up. The line had a faded paper tag written in pencil hanging from it. It listed a phone number that matched the previous number that had been accidentally disconnected, not our current one reflecting our most updated billing statements. He continued to insist that the DMARC was listed as building 2 and that he needed to measure it from there. I told him that I had no access to that building or knowledge of where the comms room would be or ability to get him access either. He said he would go check the main box somewhere else and left. I sat in the comms room with my laptop and continued to work other tickets, while this guy was gone for about 25 minutes. He came back and told me that he was able to confirm in that other equipment box that our line went to the same point as the other company's line and was definitely in building 2, with an install date roughly a year prior. That time frame was peak COVID times, when our team wasn't on site, and about 2 months before I'd started working there. It was also around the time when the ICE had stupidly gotten rid of our line and changed our phone number. Some confused technician had been given the wrong address because of a billing address clerical error, because of the complete disaster that was our account history with this provider. He'd wandered into building 2 and activated our line on the wrong building. Because the 2 buildings were connected, the line went through the overground walkway directly to the elevator. When Company B did their construction project, their IT department had no knowledge of the elevator phone line because it wasn't their account. We had no knowledge they'd done this improperly because we'd told them the issue was with building 1. When the construction was done, they took down the infrastructure because to their knowledge, it was legacy and not live. And the technician packed up his stuff and told me since he was a repair tech, he wasn't able to help. I needed to call our account manager back and request an installation so they could send an installation tech instead. I hate 3-letter 1 symbol provider. Wait, are we the mask or not? By user they J train to set the scene. I worked as an admin for a mismanaged MSP in a smaller college town who'd been contracted by a local scatterbrained apartment complex to manage their needs in their main office area. This particular apartment complex was having some construction done and had let us know that some additional cabling was going to be run by the construction crew, not by their MSP in the new area, and that once that was done, we would need to come in, patch these runs into our switch, and then test. After a few months of work, our sales team had received a call that construction was finished and that they were ready for us to come do our part. I was tasked with the job and sent out on site. When I arrived, I headed to the area where construction had been completed and assessed the situation. The first thing I noticed was that construction had actually not been completed. There was still some drywall and painting work to be done, and all the new drops they had run were just hanging out of the wall and hadn't been terminated into jack plates. Since terminating those cable runs wasn't part of what they called me out to do, I headed to the data closet, figuring I could just patch in those runs into our switch and could test once the construction crews had terminated them at the other end. In the closet, I saw the new cable runs coming out of the ceiling next to our rack, but instead of them just hanging loose, ready to be terminated, they were actually already terminated into RH45 heads and connected to a switch sitting on a metal folding chair next to the rack. This was odd since we had installed switches in their rack, which is where we were going to patch these in, and the one sitting on the chair was made by a different vendor than we used. I took pictures and sent them to our sales team. I went and grabbed the lady managing the apartments and showed her the situation. I showed her the cables hanging out of the wall in the new construction area and let her know they weren't complete. I told her we could terminate those, but that was part of the construction team's job, and she probably didn't want to pay us to do a job she was already paying another crew to do. She agreed. I took her to the closet and showed her the switch in the folding chair, where the new runs were terminated. I let her know I had no idea where it came from, and that she would need to have the team that installed it remove it before I could do anything else. She was also confused and grabbed someone from the construction team, who apparently knew what was going on, and brought him to the closet. She asked him why they had brought in a switch, and he replied that it was part of their contract with the new construction. I let them know this wasn't part of our contract or our network, as their MSP, and we couldn't manage it or do any work on it, especially considering we already had managed equipment in the rack that all data drops would need to go to, and that this extra switch would need to be removed. As far as the contract with the construction company that included a new switch, I let them know they'd need to get all that figured out before I did any work. The apartment manager lady said she would get with the construction manager and figure out what was going on and let us know. As I was leaving, I noticed a box sitting in the middle of the data closet that had some apps sitting on top of it that were the same type of apps that we had installed for them. I shrugged as I left, thinking that was a problem for another day. As anyone might have guessed, it was a problem for another day, as I was called out not long after that to figure out what was going on with the Wi-Fi. Come to find out, not only had the construction team brought in the switch, but they had also pulled down all of the apps we had installed and installed new ones of the same vendor as the chair switch they had brought in and had plugged them into their switch, still separate from our network. Once again, I had to let the apartment lady manager know that the construction crews had installed some new equipment that we couldn't manage, and that they would need to remove them and reinstall our original equipment before we could do any work. She was again nonplussed. Clearly, this project had been mismanaged and it were not communicated well from the start. And on top of having to have these crews backtrack and undo a bunch of work that they had done, they also had to pay for me to be called on site twice to not actually do any work. Fairly easy work for me, but a huge pain in the butt for the customer. At least this time. It wasn't a blunder caused by mismanagement from the company I worked for, who was prone to mismanagement.
That's lovely.